just check and make sure our gears are operating. Okay, the gears appear to be spinning, the cogs in alignment with their cogettes, and the machine appears to be in operation. The Garden of Forking Paths is growing. I'm Brian. I've got some William Blake poems here. And then I also have part 2 of Richard Rorty's Contingency, Irony, and Solidarity. So that's about the best I can do as far as setting expectations goes. in thy strength. Curb thy fierce steeds, allay the heat. That flames from their large nostrils. Thou, O summer, oft pitch'st here thy golden tent, and oft beneath our oaks has slept, while we beheld with joy thy ruddy limbs and flourishing hair. Beneath our thickest shades we oft have heard thy voice, when noon upon his fervid car rode o'er the deep of heaven. Beside our springs sit down, and in our mossy valleys on some bank beside a river clear, thy silk draperies off and rush into the stream. Our valleys love the summer in his pride. Bards are famed who strike the silver wire. Our youth are bolder than the southern swains, our maidens fairer in the sprightly dance. We lack not songs, not instruments of joy, nor echoes sweet. Waters clear as heaven, nor laurel wreaths against the sultry heat. Oh yeah, okay, there we go. Kind of a situation. Okay. Technical difficulties. That was William Blake's poem, To Summer, from Poetical Sketches. 78 of Richard Rorty's Contingency, Irony, and Solidarity, Part 2. It looks like Part 2 is called Ironism and Theory, and then this chapter, which I think is the 4th chapter of the book, is called Private Irony and Liberal Hope. We're starting in the middle of the chapter. I have defined dialectic as the attempt to play off vocabularies against one another, rather than merely to infer propositions from one another, and thus as the partial substitution of redescription for inference. I used Hegel's word because I think of Hegel's phenomenology both as the beginning of the end of the Plato-Kant tradition and as a paradigm of the ironist's ability to exploit the possibilities of massive redescription. In this view, Hegel's so-called dialectical method is not an argumentative procedure or a way of unifying subject and object, but simply a literary skill. Skill at producing surprising gestalt switches by making smooth, rapid transitions from one terminology to another. Instead of keeping the old platitudes and making distinctions to help them cohere, Hegel constantly changed the vocabulary in which the old platitudes had been stated. Instead of constructing philosophical theories and arguing for them, he avoided argument by constantly shifting vocabularies, thereby changing the subject. In practice, though not in theory, He dropped the idea of getting at the truth in favor of the idea of making things new. Criticism of his predecessors was not that their propositions were false, but that their languages were obsolete. By inventing this sort of criticism, the younger Hegel broke away from the Plato-Kant sequence and began a tradition of ironist philosophy, which is continued in Nietzsche, Heidegger, and Derrida. Are the philosophers who define their achievement by their relation to their predecessors rather than by their relation to the truth. A more up-to-date word for what I have been calling dialectic would be literary criticism. In Hegel's time, it was still possible to think of plays, poems, and novels as making vivid something already known, of literature as ancillary to cognition, beauty to truth. The older Hegel thought of philosophy as a discipline which, because cognitive in a way that art was not, took precedence over art. Indeed, he thought that his discipline, now that it had attained maturity in the form of his own absolute idealism, could and would make art as obsolete as it made religion. But ironically and dialectically enough, what Hegel actually did by founding an ironist tradition within philosophy was help decognitivize, demetaphysize philosophy. But ironically and dialectically enough, what Hegel actually did by founding an ironist tradition within philosophy was help decognitivize, demetaphysize philosophy. He helped turn it into a literary genre. Hegel's practice undermined the possibility of the sort of convergence to truth about which the older Hegel theorized. The great commentators on the older Hegel are writers like Heine and Kierkegaard. People who treated Hegel the way we now treat Blake, Freud, D.H. Lawrence, or Orwell. Ironists treat these people not as anonymous channels for truth, but as abbreviations for a certain final vocabulary and for the sorts of beliefs and desires typical of its users. Ironists treat these people not as anonymous channels for truth, but as abbreviations for a certain final vocabulary and for the sorts of beliefs and desires typical of its users. The older Hegel became a name for such a vocabulary, and Kierkegaard and Nietzsche have become names for others. If we are told that the actual lives such men lived had little to do with the books and the terminology which attracted our attention to them, we brush this aside. names of such people as the names of the heroes of their own books. We do not bother to distinguish Swift from Saeva Indignatio, Hegel from Geist, Nietzsche from Zarathustra, Marcel Proust from Marcel the Narrator, or Trilling from the liberal imagination. We do not care whether these writers managed to live up to their own self-images. What we want to know is whether to adopt those images, to recreate ourselves in whole or in part in these people's image. We go about answering this question by experimenting with the vocabularies which these people concocted. We redescribe ourselves, our situation, our past, in those terms and compare the results with alternative redescriptions, which use the vocabularies of alternative figures. We ironists hope by this continual redescription to make the best selves for ourselves that we can. Such comparison, such playing off of figures against each other is the principal activity now covered by the term literary criticism. Influential critics, the sort of critics who propose new canons, people like Arnold, Pater, Levis, Eliot, Edmund Wilson, Lionel Trilling, Frank Kermode, Harold Bloom are not in the business of explaining the real meaning of books, nor of evaluating something called their literary merit. Rather, they spend their time placing books in the context of other books, figures in the context of other figures. This placing is done in the same way as we place a new friend or enemy in the context of old friends and enemies. In the course of doing so, we revise our opinions of both the old and the new. Simultaneously, we revise our moral identity by revising our own final vocabulary. Criticism does for ironists what the search for universal moral principles is supposed to do for metaphysicians. For us ironists, nothing can serve as a criticism of a final vocabulary save another such vocabulary. There is no answer to a redescription save a redescription. Since there is nothing beyond vocabularies which serves as a criterion of choice between them, criticism is a matter of looking on this picture and on that, not of comparing both pictures with the original. Nothing can serve as a criticism of a person save another person, or of a culture save an alternative culture. For persons and cultures are, for us, incarnated vocabularies. So our doubts about our own characters or our own culture can be resolved or assuaged only by enlarging our acquaintance. The easiest way of doing that is to read books. So ironists spend more of their time placing books than in placing real live people. Ironists are afraid that they will get stuck in the vocabulary in which they were brought up, if they only know the people in their own neighborhood. So they try to get acquainted with strange people, Alcibiades, Julian Sorel, strange families, the Karamazovs, the Casselows, and strange communities, the Teutonic Knights, the Nur, the Mandarins of the Song. Ironists read literary critics and take them as moral advisors, simply because such critics have an exceptionally large range of acquaintance. They are moral advisors not because they have special access to moral truth, but because they have been around. They have read more books and are thus in a better position not to get trapped in the vocabulary of any single book. In particular, ironists hope that the critics will help them perform the sort of dialectical fear which Hegel was so good at. That is, they hope critics will help them continue to admire books which are prima facie antithetical by performing some sort of synthesis. We would like to be able to admire both Blake and Arnold, both Nietzsche and Mill, both Marx and Baudelaire, both Trotsky and Eliot, both Nabokov and Orwell. So we hope some critic will show how these men's books can be put together to form a beautiful mosaic. Can redescribe these people in ways which will enlarge the canon and will give us a set of classical texts as rich and diverse as possible. This task of enlarging the canon takes the place for the ironist of the attempt by moral philosophers to bring commonly accepted moral intuitions about particular cases into equilibrium with commonly accepted general moral principles. Familiar fact that the term literary criticism has been stretched further and further in the course of our century. It originally meant comparison and evaluation of plays, poems, and novels, with perhaps an occasional glance at the visual arts. Then it got extended to cover past criticism. For example, Dryden's, Shelley's, Arnold's, and Eliot's prose, as well as their verse. Then, quite quickly, it got extended to the books which had supplied past critics with their critical vocabulary and were supplying present critics with theirs. This meant extending it to theology, philosophy, social theory, reformist political programs, and revolutionary manifestos. extending it to every book likely to provide candidates for a person's final vocabulary. Once the range of literary criticism is stretched that far, there is, of course, less and less point in calling it literary criticism. But for accidental historical reasons having to do with the way in which intellectuals got jobs in universities by pretending to pursue academic specialties, the name has stuck. So instead of changing the term literary criticism to something like culture criticism, we have instead stretched the word literature to cover whatever the literary critics criticize. A literary critic in what T.J. Clark has called the Trotskyite Eliatic culture of New York in the 30s and 40s was expected to have read The Revolution Betrayed and the Interpretation of Dreams, as well as The Wasteland, Man's Hope, and An American Tragedy. In the present Orwellian Bloomian culture, she is expected to have read the Gulag Archipelago, Philosophical Investigations, and The Order of Things, as well as Lolita and the Book of Laughter and Forgetting. The word literature now covers just about every sort of book which might conceivably have moral relevance. Might conceivably alter one's sense of what is possible and important. The application of this term has nothing to do with the presence of literary qualities in a book, rather than detecting and expounding such qualities. The critic is now expected to facilitate moral reflection by suggesting revisions in the canon of moral exemplars and advisors, and suggesting ways in which the tensions within this canon may be eased. Or where necessary, sharpened. Well, that brings us to the next break in the text. And so I think I'll take a break and maybe come back later, or maybe tomorrow. I'm not sure. This is Richard Rorty's Contingency, Irony, and Solidarity. And yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure. This particular section, it's a little bit I felt that it became a bit of a sort of an exploration, like a written exploration, a bit more, whereas some of the other ones had more of a driving aspect. But for me, I was thinking about the sort of the study music that people listen to on the internet, and so I was kind of like, maybe this is a kind of a study paragraph where, section where he sort of introduces a slightly sort of more subdued tone that sort of allows the reader to kind of flow along on top of the text and not have to work as hard or something. And so I felt kind of the same way. I felt that there was a calmness about this section. There's something about Rorty's tone that I feel like says so much more than his words do. But the same thing, the same thing, but kind of the tone that he adopts is it's so beguiling. Richard Rorty, Contingency, Irony, and Solidarity. Okay, well, thanks again, and we'll see you later.